Welcome back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying online, for tuning back in. You are here with us live at reInvent 2024. We're here in the Expo Hall in Vegas. My name is Fiona McCann. I am a solutions architect at AWS. I work in the public sector, specifically with nonprofits, and I'm here with my co-host. How are you doing today, Robbie?
Hey, Fiona, and hey, everyone. I'm Robbie Belson. I'm a senior developer advocate here. Great to be back on the Expo floor, and we have a special segment here today.
We really do. We have the honor of interviewing Jeff Barr today. I'm sure you all know Jeff Barr. He really needs no introduction, but Jeff Barr is the AWS Chief Evangelist. He is responsible for spreading awareness and understanding of AWS, and he's been doing it for a pretty long time. Jeff, how many reInvents have you been to?
So, Fiona and Robbie, first, really happy to be here. This is always fun to get in front of the camera. So let's see, I've been to all the reInvents. The first one was 2011, I believe. So that's a total of 13. I think we had one that was online, but I've been to all of them in one way, shape, or form or another, and it's always fun. I still have great memories of the very, very first one, actually.
And I remember, I think, on Monday, there was an interview of Andy Jassy. He was talking about the origin. It took months to come up with the name. What do you remember from the earliest days when reInvent was coming to be?
So what I do remember is that for several years, our customers had been increasingly excited about AWS and the potential, and they kept saying, get us all together so we can meet each other, so we can learn, so we can do some amazing things together, so we can collaborate and just kind of learn from each other. And so we got this good idea that having a conference would be a good thing to do, but the direction from management is always, we can't do one until it's going to be the best tech conference in the world. And of course that's the obvious parts about the presentation and the facilities and the swag and the food and so forth, but it was really all about, let's make sure we can deliver lots and lots of awesome content to our attendees.
Absolutely.
And so getting to the point where we could do that certainly took us several years.
Yeah, and I mean, you have gotten to that point. You have fans, and these fans are in the chat. We have a few people in the chat who are saying hello to you, that you're a legend. Legend says reInvents are only around so people have excuses to meet Jeff Barr. That's what our commenter Robert Table says. But you mentioned really wanting to make impactful change. I'm curious, you've been at AWS for a long time. Over this long tenure, what do you see as some of the most transformative changes that you've seen in the industry?
Well, to me, it's really about the scale of what we allow people to do. And I've always thought it, and I think in the early days, I came up with this phrase of dream big dreams and think big thoughts. And this idea that you could be the developer in your dorm room. And that was kind of our archetype for a long time in the beginning of AWS, was the developer in the dorm room. They're sitting there in front of their laptop. They're thinking, wow, I could build this amazingly cool thing, and I could change the world, and I could be this smashing success. And we always would think, let's make sure that developer can find AWS, can register for it, they can learn enough to get started, they can do something awesome with it. And I still think that we're thinking about that developer, and that we want them to be able to start at any moderate-sized micro level, but they can aspire to doing something that's world scale and world scope.
Absolutely. I love that idea of really humanizing the audience and thinking of that developer as an individual. And, you know, everyone starts from somewhere. AWS started from somewhere, and we have someone in the chat who said, hey, Jeff, can you share any fun stories from the early days of AWS?
Early days. Let's see. Couple different ones. So one that I remember very vividly is the very first reInvent. And prior to the first reInvent, we certainly had been making a lot of plans internally. And for years and years, we got this good sense that there was growth. So you'd see teams being formed, you'd see people being hired, you'd see some of the daily metrics reports that were selling increasing amounts of the services each and every day. Mm-hmm. It felt very abstract, though, and it was hard to actually turn, even when you see a dollars and cents number, and I do even remember like the first $10 and $100 day of EC2 sales.
That's crazy
I
to think
remember
about.
those days. That was actually pretty cool to remember those. But it's hard to actually turn those numbers into reality. What I very profoundly remember is walking into the first keynote and getting there early to make sure I could get I needed a very special kind of a seat. I want to be kind of toward the back so I could do our launches without people seeing my screen.
And who was the first keynote speaker?
Let's see, I believe it was Andy and Jeff Bezos together.
Okay.
So I remember walking into that room, and there were, I think, 6,000 chairs set up. They were all empty when I walked in. Wow. And I'm thinking, this is the first visualization I have of our
Right.
audience and the scale of our audience.
It's feeling real.
Yeah, it felt real, and for the first time, it's like, okay, all these people actually decide to come here and to learn from us. But what was also interesting is in those very first days, we definitely did some launches at reInvent. We didn't have the very sophisticated model we have now, where there's a team partially on-site, partially off-site. We have this room, the launch room. In those first year or two, it was me on my laptop pulling things up on the screen and waiting anxiously for the announcement from the stage and then hitting publish right away. After the first two, I realized anybody standing behind me could see my screen
Right.
and would
Maybe
scoop
we
me.
should.
and that was the kind of things you don't even think about until you
Right.
actually show up. And now it's this very sophisticated operation. But doing those launches, and we pioneered something that has been, I think, very well received over the years, is that we've got all the content ready to go. It's all been fully written and reviewed, and all the links are perfect. And we have a show flow that says these are all the talks, and this is the basic order in which things will be announced. We're eagerly waiting for that next launch to happen. The millisecond we hear the brand new AWS whatever or the Amazon whatever has been launched,
Boom.
hit that published,
Yeah.
and an accurate blog post is out there and ready for our audience. And it might seem simple or obvious, but the number of times we've had people say it's so impressive that we've got that content ready and that actually appears effectively instantaneously when the launch has happened,
It means something.
it
to
turns
people.
out to really show that we have our act together and that we're doing the right thing for our audience, whether
Absolutely.
they're here, if they're lucky enough to be here, or if they're anywhere around the world and watching online. We've got that content ready, and they're all able to start reading and benefiting from that content right away.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is something that's a pretty standout portion of what you're saying, is that you started from when it was so small, and now we have this massive global community. I mean, there's people from all over the world who are here with us in Vegas right now. So my question to you is, what were the standout ways that AWS positioned itself to really be able to cater to different needs of people from all over the world in all different industries?
It's always been about developers and about education. There are some industries where the conference is basically all of the senior people in the industry, just they kind of get together to celebrate and to blow off some steam together in a fancy place.
Yeah.
We certainly get to celebrate and to have a good time here, but we really hope that people walk away actually learning something new.
Right.
And that's so important. And the cool thing to me about that is that the learning is often a little bit of an inflection point for our customers and for our audiences. And you don't always get to hear about the result of the fact that they attended the session, or they met one of us, they consumed some content.
Right.
It maybe inspired them to change a little bit about their career, what they focus on. And then 3, 5, 7 years later, they say, I heard you talk, or I saw something you did or said or shared. It made this huge difference to me. And collecting those little anecdotes over time, that is the value that I get from being here. And it's not about adulation or selfies or getting a pat on the back, all of which are great to have. It's knowing, sitting there at my keyboard, creating some content, and when I know that it goes out and people appreciate it, and then what I try to do is every time I meet someone and they give me this, like, a really cool story of how something I did has affected them even a little bit, I kind of take this little micro snapshot and I think, okay, that's my audience.
Right.
The next time I write something, it's for that one actual person that I met. And maybe it sounds weird or creepy or something, but it is literally just personifying the audience and making sure it isn't just make things and send them out just in case somebody cares. It's like, I met someone, they said something I did was meaningful to them.
Right.
I've got to continue to uphold my own standards for them.
And for every one blogger interaction you have in person, whether it's here in Vegas and beyond, there are thousands of people here tuning in who are getting to either meet you for the first time or read a blog. So for the thousands of people tuning in, my question back to you, Jeff, would be, how do you recommend experiencing reInvent virtually for those who aren't at the show today, who are tuning in live to AWS On Air?
All right, so virtually, I would say definitely watch all of the keynotes, and you're going to get the keynote. Think of that as the top level structure of the things that our customers have been asking us for and the things that we think are important to launch into the industry.
Absolutely.
I think we're now at the scale where you can't possibly know a lot about every service and about every offering. We passed that 5 or 10 years ago. I think it's really important just to pick a topic and zoom in on that topic and decide, I'm going to be incredibly knowledgeable about a particular topic. And you have to make sure that you don't disparage yourself and say, well, I don't know everything about everything, so therefore I know nothing.
Right.
You can be really awesome at one particular thing, and you should aspire to be really awesome at that particular thing versus thinking, until I know 3, 5, 7, or 50 different services, I can't take myself very seriously. It could be really scary and really daunting to look at the broad array of services and the number of functions and data types and events and messages and signals and think, wow, I have to know all of that before I'm legit. Not the case.
Yeah.
You could pick one service and say, I'm going to be the world's foremost SQS expert.
Yeah.
And there's still plenty to learn right there.
Absolutely. I feel that I'm a generalist SA, and so I feel that sometimes when I'm talking to my customers, there's so much in AWS, it's quite impossible to know everything about everything. And that actually ties in quite nicely with a question that we have from the chat. They want to know, what do you think is the most underrated AWS service or feature?
Oh, wow. Most underrated. Okay, so I always get in trouble if I'm asked for a favorite, because as a parent and a grandparent, you never have a favorite
you're
child.
not allowed,
You
not
never have a
allowed.
favorite grandchild. Most underrated.
However you interpret the word.
I would actually say it is IAM.
I am.
And
okay.
I would call it IAM because there's a lot of really fine-grained control you can exercise. You can start out with kind of a mid-level understanding of what's there, and you can get the right permissions in place, and you can enable only what you need to do. That's good. But then you can start going deeper and deeper, and you can conditionalize on different services and IP address ranges and principles and times of day. There's a lot of richness there that when people need to exercise control, that's in there. And
Absolutely. It's foundational.
I heard somewhere that there's 3,000 pages of IAM documentation. I don't know if that's true or not. I saw that somewhere, and it's like, that's really impressive.
Right.
But the amount of control that gives our customers over security, I think, is the thing to take away from that. Not that you need to absorb all those pages before you're legit. It's more. It's more. I'm not sure exactly where this is supposed to go. Okay. It's more. There's so much fine-grained control that exactly what you need to either allow or prevent, you've got that ability to do that with IAM.
Right.
And security is one of many domains that we get a chance to talk about every Friday in AWS On Air. So for those tuning in, definitely want to check out our weekly On Air show where you can continue to ask questions to Jeff. And I know we were talking before the show. You mentioned it's one of your favorite parts of the week. For those who haven't had a chance to tune into the weekly show, you want to share a little bit more about what that is and what you do every week?
Sure. So the AWS On Air segment we do that starts at noon Pacific time on Fridays. We generally will have a review. We'll have 2 in-depth segments from some recent launches where we'll have the principles behind a few of those services to explain those services and do some demos. What I am lucky enough to do is I will do a news segment. And what I do is on usually Thursday afternoons, I'll go through the What's New RSS feed.
Right.
And out of all of the 50, 60, 80, 100 launches that we did the previous week, I'll pick 3 or 4 that catch my eye in some way. And I'll sometimes pick things that are somewhat kind of pedestrian, interesting incremental improvements, and a few that are just other bigger launches. I'll familiarize myself with them, and I'll spend 5 or 7 minutes explaining those on air. It's super, super fun. One of the things I love about live shows is the fact that we do have that audience there.
Yeah.
We get the immediate questions, the immediate feedback. And really, really fun way to wrap up the week.
Well, we're talking fun questions from the audience. You have received a pretty silly question from the audience. Someone wants to know if you could have dinner with any historical figure, Jeff, who would it be?
Any historical figure. Let's see. I've had lunch with Bill Gates. I almost had lunch with Bill Gates, so I think that is already kind of covered. That's a whole fun, different story we can do sometime.
Okay.
Steve Jobs apparently doesn't like to eat very interesting things, so I don't think he would have been too interesting.
Right.
Oh, let's see. I would say maybe with Jeff Bezos would be fun.
That'd be a pretty interesting lunch. And then we have another question from, I believe, the same user.
Mr.
What is your
Bob.
favorite programming language? Thank you, Mr. Bob 5555 for all these questions.
My current programming language, and I have to say I'm totally incompetent in most of the languages I once was really good at. I have in my life I've done tens of thousands of lines of low-level assembly code. I've done hundreds of thousands of lines of C. I've done Perl. I've done Python. I've done PL1. I've done other ancient languages nobody's heard of.
Experience.
But recently I've been doing a lot of 3D printing and graphics, and so I've been using this language called OpenSCAD, where I can write these really functional programs to design interesting and cool 3D graphics, which I then
Very cool.
print.
Very
Wow.
cool. Well, we're talking about, your vast experience. I know you were telling us a little bit earlier the number of words and blogs that you've written for AWS. You want to share that with our audience tuning in?
Sure. So just in November 8th, we reached the 20-year anniversary of the AWS News blog. And in that time, I've written about 3,300 and something posts. I don't have the final number.
That's more than the number of pages of IAM documentation.
Yes. It turns out it's 1.5 million words. And which is, if you took the entire Harry Potter series and doubled that, that's about 1.5 million words.
Well, we can't wait to continue the discussion with you, Jeff. Later today, the Hot Wings eating contest with our very own producer, Nick. Folks, this is AWS On Air. Don't go anywhere. We're going to hear from the Amazon team how they scale generative AI. We'll see you soon.